Hello everyone, this is Dr. Shijun Wang. Today's video I am going to explore with all of you the Mozart Sonata in F major, crucial number 332. Mozart Sonata is probably one of the hardest things for professional pianists. Not only because technically you're so exposed and you have so few notes, and all of each one of the notes we need to really play them in the highest quality, right? I often joke about this with my students. If you miss the note in Rachmaninoff Sonata, then you just miss the note. But if you didn't do the exact articulation of a Mozart sonata, then that's considered probably a much bigger mistake in comparison to just missing a note in a Rachmaninoff piece. Because there's so many notes, right? People don't even realize. But here we have so a few, and we need to really know exactly how we should play each one of them. The other reason why I think Mozart Sonata is challenging is because it's so far remote, right? This piece itself is about 230 something years old. And how do we know what people thought about and what people how they performed it 200 years ago? And many of the convention that things people take for granted that they used 200 years ago are missing, right? We no longer know them. And of course, another thing for Mozart is that he wasn't a just a pure keyboard composer like Chopin, but he also wasn't just focused on playing and writing for keyboard as much as Beethoven or Liszt. Um, we know Beethoven is proud of the symphonies, but he himself played solely on piano. But Mozart, he played viola, violin. He was focused on opera much more than the keyboard things. Yes, he did perform and compose many successful piano concertos, and basically he made a living for a couple of years just performing his concertos. Those were big hits, but his focus, his main career dream was to compose the best operas. And like everyone, you can't separate yourself from your habit. In this case, in many of the keyboard pieces, we have such an obvious sign of operatic writing. So we have to understand those habits, those operatic treatment in order to play the keyboard sonatas well. Um, for instance, this usually when we have a sonata allegro form, we have first theme, second theme in the exposition. But this sonata will really confuse you because where is the second theme? Is this the second theme? Well, if this happened in, let's say, the middle of the exposition part, I would for sure think this is the second theme because it's as contrasting as the first theme. However, this happened in measure 13, and after a few bars, that's another very contrasting idea. That's also different. That's also different. So now we have 5 or 6 ideas in the first 2 pages, not to mention, oh, maybe there are 5 different themes. No, we simply cannot think of that way to explain this phenomenon. This is operatic writing. In Mozart's time, there were 2 very typical types of opera. One is called opera seria, series opera. The other is called opera buffa, or comic opera. So in the serious opera, it often talks about the sacrifice of a hero and Greek gods, but or the royalties, right? The aristocracy. Then they sacrifice for virtue. Um, in the comic opera, in opera buffa, it often talks about like daily life of servant or daily life of peasant, of ordinary people, and they make fun of things in life. But however, in Mozart's time, we no longer have these two separate genres, and he blended them in the same operas. And I think that's because the aristocracy, the power really is not as strong as like maybe 30 years before this. So a lot of times the person being mocked or being made fun with is the aristocracy, right? In the case of Marriage of Figaro. So we still have the this convention when we sing in opera seria. When there is a serious opera, the noble character always sing a long, expressive area that is slightly slower and very expressive and very long phrases. And when the comic character sings, it's often chopped, right? Very vertical, and they change chords more often. It's fast, and the phrases are short. And we can find examples of those different characters inside of this sonata. The very beginning, we start with legato and very long phrases, so clearly this is a noble character singing something about virtue or just singing beautifully in general. And here we have a mini duet, because right hand has this statement of, and then left hand follows. What usually happens at the end of a duet, people they have an agreement, so they sing together. So really within the first 13 measures, we already have a very noble character singing, of course not a whole area, but a part of an area, and then a little duet. And after the 12 measures, number 13. And this is so different with this long phrased area. So this is actually a very comic character singing about like making fun of things. So the phrases are much shorter, and then the attack is probably a little bit quicker compared to the beginning. And this melody, this section, reminded me of a famous area in Marriage of Figaro when Carabino was about to go to the army. Of course, Figaro made fun of him, and he sung. And this. It's really very similar. Even the embellishment. It really is similar style of writing. So here the character really is funny and lightened up. And what happened after a few bars? This is almost like a thunder striking. We have so many diminished chords. And this really brings in very big tension into the music. So maybe some bad news happened. So this is no longer singing, but this is just create this intense feeling. In measure 41, nothing intense anymore. I think this beautiful singing quality of a serious character, right? It comes back. This is again in the beautiful singing catalog. And here, this whole section, it makes you feel, the players makes you feel so busy, right? You're searching everywhere, and I think I can visualize this as when maybe they are changing the staging setting, maybe the characters, they're kind of acting to search something, so they're like walking all over the stage, trying to find stuff. So this is not singing, this is action. And of course, I'm basically explaining to you what happens in opera, and this happens so fast. Within probably a minute or two, you experience so many elements of an opera. And here, this is the ending of the exposition part. Suddenly, the texture of music changed from homophony to this is really like the texture of a choir, right? This is a chorale. And usually in Mozart's opera, and in opera in general, you often have a choir section, and in a lot of cases, the choir is not singing something that is part of the characters in the opera. The choir is commenting on the things just happened, and they're communicating with the audience, right? Almost like a Shakespeare play, right? Once in a while, then the character would face the audience and tell them what the character is thinking. So I think, well, if you wonder what I mean, just watch The House of Cards, right? The actor often just turn the head and talk directly to the audience. And I think that's the function here of this choir chorale section. So a little bit, I wouldn't say nonchalant, but a little bit outside of the drama. And here the opera comes back. So this, I think if we play the very beginning of the exposition up to here, is probably around 1.5 minutes, but we have seen so many different characters with the choir, with the stage action, with tension, with characters of comic opera or characters of the opera seria. So the most challenging part of playing this successfully is to also keep one thing in mind. If you really turn on the score of a Mozart opera, you will find different acts, different sections in different keys, different tempo, different time signature. And we don't have that, right? Because usually the opera seria, the noble character, they sing much slower, and then Figaro's this area is really fast. right? Because he was a servant. He sings with like funny characters, and that is usually fast. But here, this is a classical sonata, right? We have the elements of opera, but we're still in the rule of classical sonata. So we have to find a way to have a good tempo that works for all the characters, that works for all the sections, right? We of course want to start this very slow to express, but this tempo wouldn't work in this character. So we have to find, so we have to really find a middle ground where opera buffa and opera seria can coexist in the same tempo. Okay, in this video, I hope I introduce you a little bit. Of course, it's not enough for one video to talk about like operas and all the sonatas, but I hope this gives you a little taste of my approach to teach and to understand these wonderful Mozart sonatas. And then you can further explore that, hopefully can kind of open up new possibilities for you to discover in other sonatas that you're working on. Next week, I am going to keep talking about the second movement of this sonata. And the second movement is so important, not just in the piano literature, but in the whole music literature, and it has a very, very special place in all Mozart's pieces. And I will tell you why in the next video. You're welcome to subscribe and turn on the bell so that when I upload the newest video, you will get notified at the very first time. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week.